Welcome to our regular report from the European Parliament's plenary session in Strasbourg. After the summer recess, the agenda was packed with interesting debates and pieces of legislation. Three major issues stood out. The European economy does better, but the crisis is not over yet. Unemployment remains a major concern, and Parliament discusses guidelines to improve the situation. Parliament approves legislation to protect animals used for testing. It was not the first time Commission President José Manuel Barroso met MEPs in Strasbourg, but it was the very first time he delivered a State of the Union address. Gunnar Larsson reports.
The speech is supposed to be a recurring event, modelled on the American President's annual address to Congress on Capitol Hill. It will provide the Commission with an opportunity to present its agenda for the coming 12 months. Not surprisingly, much of Barroso's address revolved around the economy, the crisis and measures taken for a European return to growth and job creation. He also was not shy about his and the EU's success in handling the crisis.
I believe we have withstood the test. We have provided many of the answers needed on financial assistance to member states facing exceptional circumstances, on economic governance, on financial regulation, on growth and jobs. Those who predicted the demise of the European Union were proved wrong. The European institutions and the member states have demonstrated leadership. My message to each and every European is that you can trust the European Union to do what it takes to secure your future.
Following bank bailouts and efforts to shore up economies of entire nations, stability appears to have returned and green shots are springing up around Europe.
Growth this year will be higher than initially forecast. The unemployment rate, while still much too high, has stopped increasing.
Even as Europe returns to normal, much remains to be done, and José Manuel Barroso and his commissioners have an ambitious agenda.
Essentially, I see 5 major challenges for the Union over the next year: dealing with economic crisis and governance, restoring growth for jobs by accelerating the Europe 2020 reform agenda, building an area of freedom, justice and security, launching negotiations for a modern EU budget, and pulling our weight on the global stage.
EPP Group Chairman Joseph Daul followed Barroso in the debate and gave his view on what is needed.
Les Européens se demandent parfois.
Europeans wonder sometimes, if not often, what Europe is really doing to respond to their problems and expectations. And at the same time, surveys have shown for years that they want not less but more Europe.
Daul called for more provocative proposals from the Commission and challenged it to action.
Je demande donc à la Commission.
I therefore ask José Manuel Barroso and each individual European Commissioner to take increased initiative in proposing the measures and reforms we need in Europe so it works better, and to explain these plans to our fellow citizens.
In his State of the Union address, the Commission President said unemployment remained a major challenge for the EU. This week, MEPs debated new approaches to tackling the issue. Stephen Jones prepared the following report.
The most obvious answer to reducing unemployment is to create more jobs. But in many member states, the high level of legal protection for employees and the cost of welfare discourage employers from expanding. Shaba Uri, our group's coordinator on the Parliament's Employment and Social Affairs Committee, presented this week his report on employment practices in the member states, a report that included a hard-hitting assessment of the consequences of failing to address unemployment.
We need to work more, and more of us need to work. If we don't manage to get more people in the workforce, it will be very difficult to manage the public finances.
Europe's system of social protection and welfare, the so-called European social model, is hailed as one of the EU's greatest achievements. But how sustainable is it? As Europe's population ages, most EU countries are finding their pension systems coming under severe strain. One answer is to raise the minimum retirement age, a suggestion that often provokes demonstrations and strikes, such as we have seen this week in France. So, are older people just going to have to get used to working for longer in future?
For my part, I share the view of the EPP, which is that we should move towards a flexible system of retirement. This would mean that if you retire earlier, you are entitled to less money, but if you retire later, you will have more.
The report was adopted by MEPs, but with employment policy often being the subject of vigorous debate among member states, a consensus in Council might take longer to achieve.
Also on the agenda this session was the emotive issue of animal testing, and more specifically how to improve animal protection. I followed the discussions in plenary.
The new directive requires animal tests to be replaced by alternative methods whenever this is possible. When animal tests are still necessary for medical research, the number of animals used has to be kept to a minimum, and the new law imposes strict conditions for their protection. Prior authorization from the competent authorities in each member state will be required for moderate to severe testing, which can now only be carried out by trained and licensed professionals. The German MEP responsible for the dossier, Elisabeth Jägler, emphasized the stricter nature of the new rules.
The Parliament succeeded in its undertaking to come up with a truly stringent monitoring system being put in place. The competent authorities will also be able to carry out random unannounced spot checks according to the risks.
The text adopted requires member states to fund research and training into alternative methods of testing, while giving them the option of imposing stricter rules than those specified under the new law. The directive updates an old one, now very much out of date, and Jägler highlighted the urgency of approving the rules so that animal protection will be standardised across the EU, while ensuring crucial research continues to be carried out in the EU rather than in countries where standards are much lower.
Ich bin sehr überzeugt, dass wir den schwierigen Spagat
I'm very much convinced that we have succeeded in striking a balance between animal protection and allowing for research to continue to take place in Europe. A balance which takes into account research that respects human dignity and health, the interests of ill people, and the protection of animal welfare. We've made improvements which represent a quantum leap in comparison to the 1986 provisions.
Parliament has 2 plenary sessions in September, so we'll be back in 2 weeks with the next report from plenary. To keep up to date in the meantime, visit our website eppgroup.eu. Thanks for watching.